Okay, good afternoon everybody. We're coming up to 5 past the hour, so I think we'll make a start. My name is Kevin Nerona from Oracle, and welcome to a webinar on Oracle's world-class end-to-end planning and budgeting cloud service. This is the second of 4 installments, with the focus of this session being on how to utilize activity-based budgeting within Oracle's planning and budgeting cloud. If you have any questions or issues during the session, please feel free to post them using the chat facility in your remote WebEx session window, and I'll endeavour to answer those questions at the end of the session. Else, if we run out of time, I'll reply via your registered email. This session's around 45 minutes with lots to cover, so let's make a fast start. And first of all, I'd just like to cover off our objectives and the outcomes of this session, and that is to comprehensively replay our first session just at a high level. We've got some new attendees, so worth just touching on the points we went through in the first session, and then we'll focus the live demo on activity-based budgeting and forecasting techniques and use cases, hopefully leaving you with a clear understanding on where the overall service, including activity-based budgeting and forecasting, can add value to your organisation. Okay, let's have a quick recap of the first session then, and we just mentioned initially at some typical issues of those of you maybe using things like Microsoft Excel or another system maybe that isn't implemented as you'd like. What problems might you be running into? We mentioned that Excel is often used for planning when you haven't got a system in place, with lots of 2D flat spreadsheets, thousands of manually entered formulas carrying generally high risk for error and mistrust with the users looking at those particular numbers, usually leading to a significant reporting lag due to checks, more checks and rechecks. And we said that in fact I love spreadsheets. When I was using a concise grid of data, it was a very useful tool, maybe a couple of lookups or some formulas, that was fine. But when we were using it for a multi-million pound transactional budget or forecast with many versions, it probably might not be the best solution, and we would have to use a lot of person power and time to actually make it work. Audit and traceability we mentioned as difficult, real-time scenario planning, hard if not impossible, and really the main focus was that it was very difficult to devolve the process out to budget holders with complex spreadsheets. It was often a centralised process, with the key issue suggesting that strategic managers would have to wait an excessive amount of time for the plans for those spreadsheets to be put together, so the strategic manager could take decisions, and usually they would be taking decisions on data that may well be out of date at that particular point because of the time it takes to consolidate the numbers. So we suggested, what if we could take what we were doing now and maybe elevate that to the cloud in just a fit for purpose 3D cube, meaning instant consolidation upon somebody pressing save in a local cost center, a local department, trustworthy reporting, real-time scenario planning, and then maybe enhancing what we were doing by automating some of our processes, taking advantage of the embedded artificial intelligence, which I'll remind you on in this session, and also maybe making use of some of the best practice templates that we offer in our enterprise version of this product, which thousands of global customers use, including a project framework, a capital framework, and take advantage of the Oracle Cloud, meaning that we could stay ahead of the game because updates were far more frequent in the cloud. There were monthly updates, meaning we could take advantage of new developments far quicker and stay ahead of the game. And that was something that we said was akin to almost like our mobile applications, our apps that we have on our mobile phone. So doing away with those complex spreadsheets, reducing the risk and reliance on individuals, and crucially allowing the planning decisions, those strategic managers, to be able to make decisions on a far more real-time set of data, because we can instantly see the top level position. And with the simple interface that's provided, think about whether we wanted to get budget holders more engaged, more responsible in a self-service type approach. So finance were looked at as strategic business partners rather than maybe a service to be relied upon. So that's what we mentioned. We then had a quick look at what the Oracle Planning and Budgeting Cloud looks like in very simple terms. So here we go. Here's the cloud. We've got these fit for purpose 3D cubes, which are almost like spreadsheets just layered on top of each other, with the dynamic links between cost centers, accounts, years and periods, all linked automatically. And we could almost twist those cubes just like a Rubik's Cube, add another year on, analyze by cost center and account, and be able to efficiently get to the data in one source of the truth. These cubes of data could be linked. One could be for financial revenue and expenditure. One could be for detailed activity payroll information, maybe detailed social care information. You could have another one for a capital detail as well, etc. We needed to populate these cubes, so we often look at our ERP system initially and draw in the hierarchies, maybe some actuals, maybe some historic budgets, and there would be a direct link from the Oracle Finance Cloud solutions. If we didn't have one of the Oracle Finance solutions, then it would be a simple case of mapping that particular source system to one of the Oracle cubes, so easy to get data in and out. Other data, especially for activity-based budgeting, we might want to draw in payroll information, for example, social care information, other activity detail for other organisations, maybe like the NHS patient level detail into the system for not just analysis, but also to drive calculations. And we've got this red line here, which means that final budgets and forecasts can go back to the source system, so back to the ERP system. And also, if users, maybe such as budget holders, are interrogating actuals within the cloud, they're able to drill back to the ERP system so they can start answering their own questions about variances, self-serve some of the variance questions and find out why those actuals balances are derived, and maybe get to document images and detailed transactions. Excuse me. Users interact with the cloud, usually using the hierarchy, the cost center hierarchy, so they're allocated to one cost center or many cost centers. Could be assets, could be capital projects, if that's the way you want to segregate the data. So they access the cube in a secure manner, only looking at their data, whether it be a high level or low level. We can also layer workflow on top of this, so we can set plans up with regards to budget cycles. So it could be for the budget preparation cycle, could be for a medium-term forecast, financial plan, a forecast, and that could be approved through the hierarchy again, so we can put approval on this to help validate those budgets and make sure they're produced in a timely manner and approved by the organisation rather than just finance. Finance will always have the final say, but it's just a mechanism of allowing the organisation to feel engaged with the budgets and forecasts. And of course, when everything's agreed in here, we've got the ability to analyse this data directly from the cloud and report immediately from one source of the truth. So very simple diagram, but hopefully gets across quite well what the concept is behind the Oracle Planning and Budgeting Cloud. Okay, just a quick recap on what we looked at in the last session. I'll do this very quickly, and then we'll get on to activity-based budgeting. I'm going to fire into the Oracle Planning and Budgeting Cloud, dive in, and this is the landing page that we were presented with. I was an administrator, so I had a lot more icons on here than you might be used to. As an end user, you might just be looking at your tasks. What do I need to get underway? It could be a forecasting task for a monthly forecasting task, a quarterly forecasting task. It could be a budget preparation task. It could be another planning cycle that I need to look at. And these are all the various tasks within that, right down to the bottom where I need to submit my particular budget in this particular task list. Also, I might want to get a bit of a beginning of the day feel as to where I am. So this dashboard here allows me to have a look at my actuals, maybe break it down by net expenditure, revenue, and maybe drill down and have a look at the detailed cost behind my particular area that I'm responsible for. Top 3 variances that I might want to go and investigate. And I've got some activity here, just headcount and overtime. I can have other statistical measures that allow me to then drill down here on headcount, maybe focusing on overtime if that's relevant to your particular organisation. So yeah, these can be easily set up by yourselves, drag and drop in terms of creating these. I'll show you a little bit of that later. But back to the tasks, what we did is have a look at the task pane. We just gave us a bit of an overview as to how we could get to the various areas of planning. So we had a look at our medium-term financial plan, annual budget, in-year forecasting, and a couple of reports. Just flashing through down our tasks in the medium-term financial plan, which is where we concentrated on the first session. I just showed that we could have instructions at the very top, just either a hyperlink or maybe a Word document to say what you should be trying to achieve. And if I dive into those instructions into each task, I've got a complete button. I can click next and just jump straight to the next task without having to go to the list again. This was my next task here, and just complete what I need to do, and then when I'm finished, tick that and go on to the next. And the idea is, if I just come back to this main screen, when I refresh, you can see that this traffic light system allows me to understand where I am, and also the managers and administrators to help users along in their journey to getting their plan completed on time. On prepare baseline, we focused in on a really simple form to just demonstrate data entry. So here we had a final. Here we had in my finance cost center, I had some account codes. I had last year's budget. I needed to, at a very high level, create next year's budget and 2 years in the future. I had the breakdown in detail. If I expand down on my base budget here, so I can see how that was made up. Notice the in-year environments. Here, I also could break down by period and year very easily if I wanted to, quarters and periods if I expand further. We went on to data entry, and that was really simple in terms of I could just type in entries if I want to, but also, so let me just do that, I could type in entries if I want to, but also what we said we could do is invoke business rules. You can create business rules in the system. They're like if statements, formulas that you might do in Excel, but what's great about them is that you can allow the user to right-click and invoke those business rules by a simple menu line selection. So, for example, I could choose to seed the baseline of my medium-term forecast as per the previous year. So if I click on that, press launch, it invokes the business rule in the background. Excuse me, and that gives me a baseline of my next year my medium-term financial plan as per last year. Notice the difference here in terms of my premises is not quite as last year, 410 compared to 412, and that's because of my environment. My environment isn't carried over because it's non-recurring. Excuse me, and that is things that you can write into. Those are the kind of items you can write into your business rules, make them quite efficient in terms of allowing the user to get to where they need to very quickly. Also, we talked about how we could uplift the numbers very quickly. So rather than individually entering numbers at a bottom level account code, I could click on my high level number here, and I've got a nice data shortcut tab here which allows me to do lots of things, including cut and paste, attach comments, look at audit as well. But I can also uplift, so I could uplift that number, that total expenditure number, whether that be telephone costs across the entire organisation, maybe reduce them by 10% and see what that looks like. Very nice for scenario planning. I could proportionally spread that as per the numbers in there already, or maybe relationally spread it as per last year's budget, last year's actuals, evenly split it, or just fill it in as a number. So we talked about how quick we could update the numbers. We also talked about audit being something that was in the system and very beneficial. So on a particular number, we can look at the change history, who's updated that number, when they updated that number, and we could also post comments and attach any supporting documents to a particular entry, and that would build up an audit, a commentary that that other users could contribute to, and we could actually report on these comments as well, so they could form the final reports. We could pull these comments out at either a high level, being the total expenditure, or the cost centre level, or at a very low level account code detail. So that was as far as we went with data entry. We talked about the fact that we could also filter, which was nice. So we could just say, show me everything over 200,000, and that would keep those particular figures, which was good for scenario planning as well, because we could just uplift on those particular numbers. And there was a few other bits that helped us get to where we wanted to in a quicker manner. We also then looked at a bit of activity, but really with the view to looking at artificial intelligence, the artificial intelligence that's built into the product. We looked at predictive planning, and we drill down into property repairs and maintenance. For our activity-based budgeting, we'll be doing this on employees and social care, but let's take a sneak peek. So if I right-click on this particular number here, excuse me, what it's asking me to do is drill down into a linked sheet called property maintenance, because I need to build up this number. I'm not just going to be able to type in a number for this particular entry. We had a really simple form, just properties, average property value, property maintenance across multiple years and periods, lots of historic data in there as well. And what that allowed me to do is, if I right click on the average property value, is invoke the embedded predictive planning capabilities. And this is a supportive tool that's used in the commercial sector. The likes of Tesco's and Sainsbury's predict their ice cream sales, for example, on a seasonal basis using techniques such as Amira and Samira. These are regression techniques that are embedded in the commercial sector and shipped along with this product. And you can have this along the bottom of the screen here, just predicting what will be happening in the future for you. Not to say that you've got to take the prediction, but it's just really giving you a view as to what where you might be going wrong in your forecast. So just to explain what you're seeing here, this is the historic information here, which has been smoothed out as per these lines here, and the blue line is the forecast, the system forecast, the prediction. Our red line is what we have currently forecast, and we're a bit away, as we can see here. The first video goes into more detail on this, but essentially it gives me detail of the prediction plan. What I can do is interact with this prediction. I can, for example, put in a worst case and best case, maybe put in my own growth curve of a particular percentage, and that gives me the best case and worst case. If I want to pull the best case down a bit, I can. I can see that my current forecast is very near the worst case, and if I go to the top here, I can see that I'm very my risk rating is incredibly high, 93%, suggesting that I am likely to be away from my prediction. If I want to take the system forecast as a base point, I can do that. I can paste across my prediction to my base budget, my base forecast as a start point, and then you can see me pasting the details, and notice that my forecast then pops up here, and my risk rating goes right down. And I can make some updates if I want to, in terms of some manual updates, maybe with some comments using my local knowledge. But that's given me a steer as to where I need to be in terms of my forecast. And I can have this running in the background all the time. So if I go back to my baseline, wherever I click, that prediction will be running in the background and be showing me what the system is thinking in terms of its prediction. So my particular prediction can run alongside my forecasting form. So as I click, it predicts dynamically. So the more data in there, the better. Just while I was on that form, what we also mentioned was the fact that we could export to something called Oracle Smart View, which was just a nice another interface in terms of the Oracle Cloud. So if I right click and scroll down and invoke Oracle Smart View, I can export to a spreadsheet anytime, but this Smart View is a spreadsheet with a fantastic plugin, Excel plugin, an Office plugin in fact, that allows me to draw in data from the Oracle Cloud, but not just draw it in, just grab the password there, but also go on to update the figures very efficiently. So for accountants, if they're used to Excel and would rather use it in particular scenarios, which is always going to be the case, you can use it in this format here. So it draws in the numbers straight away after login. And as soon as I update these numbers, so if I go for 200 on here, for example, and then submit that data, if I go back to the web form and refresh, notice my number immediately updates here. So it's just another interface into the budgeting cloud. But as soon as I press save in the Excel spreadsheet, the numbers are instantly consolidated in the cloud, allowing my strategic managers to see where we are in terms of the numbers. So nice feature. You can do a lot of stuff in here, and all the key features that you'd want to do in the web form, like your tasks, looking at the green and red traffic lights, you'll be able to do in this particular format here. So another way of getting to the Oracle Planning and Budgeting Cloud that we mentioned in the first session. Okay, just quickly skimming through what else we did. We went through all these different tasks, which in turn were allowing me to copy the baseline into another bucket called the MTFS. There was a process for that I could just click on and it would do. I could then compare my latest scenario with my final MTFS, make some adjustments. I also had the ability to view my MTFS by service, so I could look at the different cost centres and see how people were doing, what those numbers were tallying up to. We suggested we weren't doing very well, only finance had updated the numbers. As I clicked next through the tasks, it took me through an allocation spreadsheet where I could allocate out my final numbers. So for example, for human resource or maybe estates, I could allocate out those numbers as per maybe headcount or floor space and recharge that out in the budget very efficiently. And then as I clicked next, it immediately took me through to the approvals, where I could then submit my particular area for my MTFS for approval, and that would go through in terms of promoting that through the hierarchy. It could be rejected with comments, attachments. I could see where that was sitting in terms of approvals, and it could go as far as you wanted to as an organisation. You don't have to invoke the workflow. This is something that just helps you get through the process. So that was something that we looked at, and then we just flicked through some of the other processes. So the annual budget, for example, looked at the annual budget in terms of just profiling horizontally. We looked at how we could update numbers vertically very quickly with our top-down budgeting or bottom-up budgeting, whichever way you want to look at it. But horizontally, we could update numbers and seasonally profile that as per the numbers that were there already, or maybe use spreads very quickly. And we just did this on a working budget, but you could split this by the SIP adjustments, your savings, your inflations. You could do it as detailed as you wanted to. We looked at forecasting as well. I mean, most of what we did was in the MTFS in terms of data entry, predictive planning, but we just looked at how we could, maybe for in-year monitoring or forecast, allow a user to, in the task, have a dashboard as the first task to review the position. So we invoked a dashboard. This is one that I created very quickly in terms of traffic light variances for premises, transport, maybe third-party payments. We need to look at that as it's getting towards red. We had some statistical information in terms of headcount. We also had the ability to interact with this trend graph. So we looked at employee costs, for example, and had a look at the trend for the budget versus forecast. And we also showed how quick these were to create. So I went into dashboards and I fired up the dashboard that I'd showed you just there in creation mode, and I edited this dashboard and showed you how easy it was to just drag and drop maybe another graph. Let's go for a bar graph on the side here and adjust that particular visualization, edit that graph and maybe add a data source. So let's go for account breakdown, maybe format the graph and save that away, maybe add a URL for an intranet page, even an internet page, an area for commentary. So very quick to create these. And we finished up in the first session at looking at some reports. So we'd agreed our forecast, our budgets. We did mention environments, which is something that's in the system as well. Sorry, just before reports, we looked at environments and how they could be put into the system. We could highlight those, agree those, approve those environments, view them in terms of how they changed the original budget to the current budget. So this was the base budget, and all the different changes, including environments, to the latest budget. So we can view the budget in that manner, making it really clear for the end user. And then when we got to the end of our particular task in forecasting, we started off with a dashboard. What we had was a formal report at the very end of our tasks. So as I clicked through the task, I invoked my report, and I could fire this up at any point and it would produce a regulatory report, a final report that I could export in a self-service manner for me to save away or just review. And if I wasn't ready as an organisation for self-service, then what I could do is distribute these reports and burst those out using a distribution list, so each user gets their data set that they need to see. So that was something that we looked at. We looked at a couple of other reports just to close the loop. We looked at an online interactive report, a report dashboard, which was using the same tool set. This is a web reporting designer that's inbuilt with the system. Excuse me. So you could create your own reports, pixel perfect reports, have those interactive so I could drill into different detail very easily. And we could also report at a very detailed level, so at the activity level, the statistical level. Here this was employee costs, so users could look at a final report and even have that interactive if they wanted to. And just closing up on reporting, what we looked at was actually reporting the other way round, which is often the case in terms of getting an Excel template, a regulatory Excel template. This was an RA return, which is used in the public sector for local government, which has to be submitted, and the template's downloaded. And what we suggested was, this is one of the templates that I downloaded, is we could have a live link to the planning system using our SmartView plugin, so we could just refresh the plugin that I show you, get in the numbers, and then use our sum ifs and lookups to populate the majority of this document. Maybe not all of it, but the majority of it. And this works across Word. This plugin works across all the Office applications, PowerPoint, Word. So if you had a presentation or a Word document, maybe an annual report, final report, then you would be able to look at that, to do the same thing. Put your graphs in there, your grids in there, and refresh that data into your report. Okay, so that was the crux of the first session. There's a bit more that I'll cover a little bit later in terms of what we looked at. Just to quickly mention, before we look at activity-based budgeting, we did talk about the enterprise version and how we had frameworks inbuilt in the system, financials framework, a workforce framework to build up that workforce, the workforce plans, things like national insurance rates, individuals, grades of pay, was out of the box in the system. We had a capital framework and a project framework that all was out of the box and interlinked with the financials framework. So as you were drawing up projects, you could draw in workforce into those projects, individuals that needed to work on those projects, maybe capital assets into that project, and that would fire off the income and expenditure budget straight into the financials. So everything was linked in together. That was an example of the capital framework where we looked at building in assets, monitoring current assets, building in new assets, and also the project framework where we could review current projects and build in and request new projects and look at the viability of those projects in terms of payback, ROI. Cash flow projections as well were supported in terms of looking at our responsibilities for cash flows and how they should be projected into the future. And we also looked at a couple of other options in terms of performance reporting, where we could not only create those final reports, but also get users involved in creating parts of those final reports. So maybe the header, maybe the executive summary, maybe the footer, and get those agreed as a final report using our performance reporting module. And the last bit we covered off in the first session was the analytics cloud, which sat on top of the planning solution and allowed us to expand on the analytics that was already provided in the planning cloud. And this really allowed us to connect not only the planning cloud data source, but any other data source. So, excuse me, any other activity data source that you wanted to connect in, maybe directly to the social care system, the detail social care system, maybe your property, your housing system, bring in that detail directly by a few clicks of the button, and overlay products such as this, the day-by-day app that allows an end user to just on the fly review their data and filter. You can see it's got an intelligent searcher, so as I'm searching, it's creating filters for me and producing those numbers on the go, so I'm able to review and keep on top of my numbers and on top of my expenditure as I was mobile. And we looked at one more analytics cloud enhanced data set, which was really quite exciting, the data visualization app, where you could drag in your data sources, drag and drop your sales, your expenditure, your activity. And as you can see here, what it's starting to do is intelligently, automatically write narrative for your report in terms of the numbers that it was seeing as a start point. Gives you a great start point for your annual reports, which you can go on to amend. So that was really recapping the first session, and allows us to then go on to activity-based budgeting and describe how we can support activity-based budgeting in the Oracle Planning and Budgeting Cloud. So just to describe very quickly what activity-based budgeting is and maybe some of the theory behind it. Excuse me. And I'm sure you're all aware of what it is, but just in case, it's a type of budgeting that's commonly used by large companies in the private sector, and generally, who generally want to get a better understanding of how their resource is generated and spent in detail. And activity-based budgeting generally attempts to look at the individual costs of every key activity that the organisation undertakes. It looks at each cost and attempts to look at the relationships of how those activities intertwine. So if you hire a member of staff, for example, we incur direct costs, of course we do, salary costs, pension, employee NI, but what about the other costs, for example, laptops or PCs, IT related costs, HR related costs, training costs. So it's being able to interlink that at a detailed level, and that activity-based budgeting may be in the public sector for local government, especially in key areas such as payroll, especially again for the NHS, payroll is very key, a high percentage of your costs, but also social care, children, adult social care, maybe children's services. So able to provide a huge benefit in terms of providing the detail behind those key cost areas. So overall, I suppose the thought is it allows managers and maybe budget holders alike to depart from the traditional view of, okay, that's what we spent last year, let's uplift those figures in a traditional incremental way, and rather start thinking of the areas that they're responsible for as a business. A service-based business, a product service-based business, and understand their processes pervasively, holistically, across the organisation from start to finish. How their business impacts other areas of the organisation. So hopefully it goes on to instill a culture of customer focus, helping reinforce an understanding to those managers in their business unit that it's providing a service for their customers and consumers, all consumers, and allowing them to plan strategically whenever there is a need to get to that level of detail. They're able to do that online and in a connected way, rather than having to do that maybe offline if they do go to that level of detail. So overall, these methods are supposed to promote teamwork between departments, and which is always notoriously difficult, getting the departments to work together in a detailed manner, because we understand the activity that goes on in the business. And when we have that operational level of detail to hand, I suppose we've got a much better chance of identifying and removing any of those bottlenecks that slow down the process. So all round, hopefully it sounds a really good idea in practice. But the reality is, if you've got a manually derived system, maybe using Excel, for example, we talked about the complexities and difficulties of just being able to get the basic numbers into Excel and compile those together. Going to an activity-based method or way of working can be seen as complicated and time-consuming, and most would agree that dedicated software would be required for you to start achieving some of the outcomes that I've just described and mentioned. So let me show you how activity-based budgeting can efficiently work in Oracle's Planning and Budgeting Cloud. And what I'll do is I'll go back to my system here, just kick off in my in my tasks area here, and head back to my favourite area, my medium-term forecast or financial plan. Go to my prepare baseline area, my simple form, where I was able to get across my ways of data entry. and we looked at the fact that the property repairs and maintenance account code had activity behind it. Also, employee costs would be an area where you might want to be able to look at that detail. So if I right click and select review employees, again I can get a linked sheet, and this is directly linked to that account code in this particular planning cycle, in terms of me being able to build up the number for that particular account code, and I can have a start point as an import to this particular sheet. This could be an import as per my latest payroll position. So if I was planning my budget, that might be just before I start my planning cycle. I may wish to import my latest payroll activity as my start point. For a forecasting exercise, I may wish to do this once a month, or you may wish to think about this as a more live option, and that data feed can be a static data feed that's scheduled once a month, or it can be real time if that's something you want to explore. And then once we've got this data in, we can have it for memorandum purposes only, but also we can start interacting with this level of detail in terms of selecting grades and also selecting, adding new employees, transferring new employees as well. If that's something we want to do, add new employees, add vacancies, transfer new employees, amend new employees. And when we add new employees, we can put in prompts, for example, as per your requirements. So enter the starting salary, enter the grade maybe. Do they start off as the top of grade? And we can have linked detail to that. So headcount, salaries, national insurance. We can decide whether they're active, whether they start at a particular period of the year, whether they're on maternity, or whether they're on annual leave for a particular part. We can cost in things like NI and pension rates, and those will have assumptions in the background that we can model. So NI rates, pay awards that we can model across the board or by band as well. So at a very detailed level, we can start modeling what's actually going to happen in the business and have that ripple through right through to our baseline, right at the very top of this particular area of our baseline. So everything's linked. So when we report on that information, it's not saved on a spreadsheet somewhere locally. It will be saved in the system and in a linked manner. Going on to adult social care here, I've done something very similar. Notice that I've got in my high-level account codes, I've got the adult social care council apportionment here as my parental value, and then the sum of that is the total costs of my adult social care, and the net view of the income that offsets that particular cost. So user contributions, any grants, health grants, any other income. So this is just the way I've decided to design it. You might be doing this in a different way, but it's just an example that I've got. And again, I've got a directly linked adult social care system import here. So this is from a system maybe like Liquid Logic that's imported at this level of detail. You don't have to import at this level of detail. Maybe you want to import at a more rolled up level, maybe by care type, for example. But again, I can interact with this. So I can right click, maybe add another entry, delete entries, add lookups, drop downs if I want to. I can maybe decide to use my filters here and start doing some scenario planning, which we'll look at in session 3. So right click on the age, maybe look at anybody that's over 50 and keep those individuals. Maybe then go on to look at any costs that are over 200 per week, and then maybe go on to inflate that cost using my allocate button. So very useful there. I can then maybe roll this up using another business rule into a high level view to see the number of applications within that detail by particular care type, and how many of those applications have savings over a particular percent, over £14,000, between the sliding scales. So i.e. they need to provide a particular user contribution, and that helps me build upon that. And then maybe you want to go on to draw in detail from other systems like Poppy and Pansy or other population systems, where you can try and forecast your population needs into the future. Right, I'm going here into 3 years into the future, and I'm overlaying the base population, the births, mortality, etc., to provide population projections, and I've rolled up my average population adult social care needs using the detail below that you saw in terms of the import and the modelling that I've done before, and then here I've got an average tariff for the adult social care needs. Excuse me. And again, you can have this in as much detail as you want to. Maybe you want to break out those tariffs by care type and build up that detail in that way. At this point, I might want to invoke my predictive planning just to check how the system thinks that I'm projecting into the future. So, I've got my projection in, but I can have a look at the system here, and it's telling me that my particular population projection may need a bit of looking at because I am away from the system prediction. So I might then want to click into my different population metrics such as asylum and see if there's any problem there. Very quickly I can see that looks okay, it's green. Maybe look at immigration. That might need a little bit of looking at as it's amber. Mortality looks fine in terms of what the system thinks. Births also okay. But my base population probably needs looking at. So very quickly the system can help me identify where I need to be focusing on. So when I press save there, I can have business rules that are invoking in the background and working all that detail excuse me, in terms of the formulas that I've created. The user just needs to model in terms of running their business, and in the background the system will then go and look at the different links for income and expenditure, maybe looking across the balance sheet as well to go and post the relevant entries in the budget. And when I go back to the baseline budget, I can see that those particular values have then been linked in to the adult social care items at the bottom, and it's generated the numbers for me. And again, I can always drill back down and have a look at how that detail and makeup has made us arrive at these numbers, and I can report on that detail as well. So everything in one area, in one cloud, with comments and attachments within it. Okay, just spend another 5 minutes if that's okay, because we started at 5 past, just closing on what we've seen there. Hopefully that's given you an idea of how activity-based budgeting would feel in Oracle's Planning and Budgeting Cloud. And overall, in my mind, it allows you to close that material tolerance gap. Where you say, actually, that's going to be too much work, it's too detailed, it may be accurate, it may be a good thing to do, but I can't quite afford the time or resource to be able to do that. It hopefully closes that gap and allows you to achieve a far more accurate, meaningful, holistic organisational budget in the key areas of your organisation. So starting off in one key area, maybe then growing it into another key area. Just to close and summarise, just to mention in session 1, we did look at some of the key developments in Oracle's Planning and Budgeting Cloud that are going to be coming, some exciting developments, and of course in the Oracle Cloud you're going to be able to take advantage of these very, very quickly as they come through the monthly updates. This was taking the predictive planning that you've just seen to the next level, where it's always working in the background and producing a dashboard to alert you of different correlations and variances that you might want to take advantage of, identifying the root causes and surfacing those to the users. So rather than having to go and look for them, it's intelligently bringing them to your attention. So exciting stuff there in terms of taking predictive planning further. And then we talked about the PBCS automated bot, excuse me, which was really nice, where we could ask the bot questions, not just bring back the numbers, but also update the numbers. So if we wanted to update our forecast because we knew something was changing in our organisation, in our business unit, we could do that immediately using the bot. Here you can see I'm updating numbers for December in a particular, how many units for a particular statistical measure. Again, this could be payroll related, social care related, and that allowed me as a budget holder to immediately update the forecast, allowing strategic managers to get a very immediate view of what the business was thinking and take action far quicker by providing the means for the individuals on the ground to be able to update those forecasts and budgets very efficiently. Just to close on this session, I hope you found it informative. Overall, hopefully what you've seen is the Oracle Planning and Budgeting Cloud providing a truly collaborative way of working in a fit-for-purpose manner. Also, with the assistive technologies providing predictions for you and helping you support your plans, but also layering reporting and workflow on top of those plans to make sure they're robust and very robust, transparent, and very efficiently able to consolidate those plans for better outcomes. We mentioned in the first session, and just to quickly re-mention those, the cloud infrastructure. That was very pertinent in terms of what we're trying to achieve in the cloud here with Customer Connect. We've got a community of people using a very similar software base, and our Customer Connect service allows you to really leverage that by joining in with the community, asking questions, even downloading dashboards and reports and reusing those reports and sharing those amongst yourselves. And that's really the power of the cloud. Notwithstanding the savings on IT resource and our IT servers, hardware, the power of the users coming together is really where I personally see the cloud providing some real advantages. And just to re-mention the Gartner, the leading Gartner review or the Gartner report suggesting that Oracle was the leading, the regularly leading provider of cloud planning and budgeting software. So you would be reassured that you are joining a very robust and leading edge community in terms of the cloud vendor that you're joining. We mentioned some ROI here, which was really quite compelling. This was not including the IT hardware savings or IT resource savings in terms of the cloud infrastructure, and still returns significant savings in terms of data consolidations and just being closer to the numbers. And you can see that we've been incredibly lean in terms of the numbers that we've been providing, a savings of 0.01%, not even just 1%, meaning incredible savings in terms of being able to be far more transparent and being able to look at those consolidated numbers far quicker than you could have before. Feel happy to work through these with you in terms of the averages that you think you might be able to save, and see what the numbers come up, what the returns are for you. Upcoming webinars, just to plug those before we close. Next session we'll focus in, again, we'll be recapping on the first session and the second session, maybe at a slightly higher level as new people join the sessions, and then we'll go into scenario planning and look a bit more into how we can leverage the planning and budgeting cloud to be able to plan and replan using the one data source in the system. And then we've got the following week, strategic workforce planning, whereby we take the employee-based planning that we looked at here, the financial employee-based planning, and take it one stage further, whereby actually we know what we want to do in the future in terms of those financial plans, but how can we take those statistics and then look at the skills that are needed to execute those plans. So what are the type of employees we need? What are the skills required in terms of being able to execute those plans looking forward? So it'd be great to if you could join those to have a look and see how we could achieve that in the cloud. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that second demonstration, a bit of a recap, and hopefully incorporating how we can use activity-based budgeting very effectively and efficiently in those planning methods, really building upon our first session and adding value to the planning cycles, whether that be forecasting or budget preparation. Just to remind you of how fast we can spin up these environments, and the cost of the subscription-based offering in terms of how we position this. It's not buying the software anymore with a big outlay on capital expenditure. It's not a big implementation cycle. We're talking about 4 to 6 weeks for one area like forecasting or budget preparation being spun up on a cloud service, and you might be surprised to know how the cost of a subscription to the Oracle planning and budgeting service in terms of the value that I've hopefully shown you in session 1. So do contact your account manager for more detail on that side of the commercials. If you've got any other questions, please do share those with me using the email address that I've got on screen. I'll leave that up for a little while. I haven't got any questions here in the chat facility, so please do email those through if you have got them. Thank you for joining the session. I hope you found it informative, and hopefully see you on the next session. That's the end of the webinar. Thank you very much.